Hello, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International.
And I'm CJ Hero. Welcome to the program. On tonight's headlines.
Japan's Meteorological Agency lifted a tsunami advisory around an hour after a strong 7.2 magnitude earthquake struck off the country's northeastern coast on Saturday, causing no immediate damage or injuries.
An earthquake with a magnitude of 5.7 struck central Mexico on Friday, seismologists said, triggering alarms in the capital where anxious residents poured into the streets.
Record rains and widespread flooding prompted evacuations along Australia's east coast on Saturday and filled Sydney's main reservoir to overflowing for the first time in 30 years.
And U.S. President Joe Biden denounces the upsurge of violence against Asian Americans, telling a community plunged into grief after this week's Atlanta murders that the nation must not be complicit in the face of racism and xenophobia.
First, Japan's Meteorological Agency lifted a tsunami advisory around an hour after a strong 7.2 magnitude earthquake struck off the country's northeastern coast on Saturday, causing no immediate damage or injuries. The quake hit at 6:09 p.m. local time in Pacific waters of Miyagi region with a depth of 60 kilometers, according to the JMA, issuing an advisory for tsunami waves of around 1 meter. Thousands of households received evacuation warnings over the alert, which was lifted at around 7:30 p.m., prompting municipalities to also end the evacuation measures. Local utilities and the nation's nuclear authority said the region's nuclear plants did not show any abnormalities after the latest quake, although local railway firms suspended services, including the high-speed Shinkansen bullet trains. The U.S. Geological Service put the strength of the quake at 7 magnitude. The quake and tsunami advisory come not long after Japan marked a decade since the catastrophic 9.0 magnitude earthquake of March 11, 2011, which triggered a killer tsunami and the Fukushima nuclear meltdown. The so-called triple disaster affected Japan's northeast, including Miyagi. Some residents of coastal communities said they had fled to higher ground after the advisory was issued Saturday evening. The Nuclear Regulation Authority said there had been no reports of abnormality at the area's nuclear facilities, including the crippled Fukushima Daiichi plant, the Onagawa nuclear plant, and various smaller facilities and experimental nuclear reactors. A spokeswoman at Tokyo Electric Power, or TEPCO, which is now dismantling the Fukushima reactor, said the facility's cooling system was operating normally. Last month, the region was also shaken by another strong quake that injured dozens. One person was subsequently found to have died in the tremor, which meteorologists said was an aftershock of the 2011 earthquake.
An earthquake with a magnitude of 5.7 struck central Mexico on Friday, seismologists said, triggering alarms in the capital where anxious residents poured into the streets. Despite the panic, there were no immediate reports of injuries or significant damage. The quake struck 59 kilometers or about 37 miles southeast of San Marcos in Guerrero State at a depth of 19 kilometers, according to the National Seismology Service. The tremor triggered Mexico City's alarm system, which uses seismic monitors to give residents advance warning of a quake. But in the end, it was barely felt in the capital, where city authorities said there were no reports of damage. In the resort of Acapulco, located in Guerrero State, closer to the epicenter, the tremor was felt more strongly, causing tourists to flee their hotels. Mexico is frequently shaken by earthquakes, particularly along its Pacific coast. In 2017, the capital was hit by a 7.1 magnitude tremor that toppled buildings and left 370 people dead and thousands injured throughout the country.
A volcano erupted just 40 kilometers from Iceland's capital, Reykjavik, on Friday, with red lava spewing out of the ground and a crimson glow lighting up the night sky. Glowing red lava spewed Saturday from that volcano that has erupted near Iceland's capital after being dormant for more than 900 years. But officials said the eruption was small and did not appear to represent a danger to people. Dramatic images filmed by a Coast Guard helicopter showed streams of red lava bubbling and flowing out of the fissure as the lava continued to flow. On Saturday, clouds of blue gas were also swirling from the site located just 40 kilometers from the capital and near the Blue Lagoon Geothermal Spa, a popular tourist destination. The eruption occurred on Friday around 20:45 GMT, lighting up the night sky with crimson glow after hundreds of small earthquakes shook the area. While Iceland's Keflavik International Airport and the small fishing port of Grindavik are just a few kilometers away, the zone is uninhabited and the eruption did not appear to present any danger. There were no reports of ashfall, although tephra, solidified magma rock fragments, and gas emissions were to be expected. The public has been advised to stay away from the scene and access to the area has been blocked off. Police ordered residents living east of the volcano to close their windows and stay indoors due to the risk of possible gas pollution carried by the wind.
Meanwhile, there were 175 volcanic earthquakes recorded in Taal volcano for the past 24 hours, including 131 tremors lasting from 1 to 15 minutes, according to the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, or PHIVOLCS, on Saturday. The number is higher than the 110 volcanic quakes recorded the previous day. These earthquakes are caused by movements or eruptions of magma from the volcano compared to tectonic quakes, which are caused by fault movements. Taal volcano has been under alert level 2 or increased unrest since March 9. PHIVOLCS reiterated that entry into Taal volcano island, a permanent danger zone or PDZ, must be strictly prohibited. Local government units were also advised to continuously assess and strengthen the preparedness of previously evacuated barangays around Taal Lake in case of renewed unrest.
Meanwhile, record rains and widespread flooding prompted evacuations along Australia's east coast on Saturday and filled Sydney's main reservoir to overflowing for the first time in 30 years. Authorities warned of potentially life-threatening flash floods as the torrential rains pummeled a vast coastal region already soaked by an unusually wet summer. Police said hundreds of people had flocked to evacuation centers in areas north of Sydney and New South Wales state, and they expected many more to seek shelter as the rains moved south down the coast. The Bureau of Meteorology reported flooding levels surpassing record 2013 floods along the Hastings River outside Port Macquarie, about 400 kilometers north of Sydney. The Bureau also said towns in the area have already seen record rainfall of more than 400 millimeters since Friday morning. The flood and extreme weather warning stretch from Port Macquarie to areas 500 kilometers south of Sydney, where residents were urged to stay indoors due to the flash flooding risk. The Warrangamba Dam, which provides much of the drinking water for Sydney, began spilling over Saturday afternoon in what experts expected to be the first significant overflow of the reservoir since 1990.
In other news now, protesters returned to the streets across Myanmar on Saturday, defying a junta-led campaign of fear as regional powers Indonesia and Malaysia condemned the violence deployed by security forces against anti-coup demonstrators. Outside of protests, crackdowns continue on the streets and residential areas across Myanmar, said the Assistance Association for Political Prisoners, or AAPP, monitoring group. Casualties and unprovoked shootings are increasing day by day, it said. In the central ruby-producing city of Mogok, local media, Myanmar, now reported that a neighborhood's night guards were shot overnight. The country's commercial hub, Yangon, has emerged as a hotspot for unrest as security forces armed with guns continue to root out protesters wielding homemade protection gear. But the resistance movement remains defiant. Myanmar's regional neighbors on Friday condemned the escalating violence, with Indonesian President Joko Widodo calling for a high-level regional meeting to discuss the crisis. Malaysia's Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin echoed the need for an emergency summit among the 10-country Association of Southeast Asian Nations. International condemnation by the United States, former colonial power Britain, and the United Nations has so far failed to slow the violence. European Union foreign ministers are set to approve sanctions on Monday against 11 junta officials, according to EU diplomats.
In other news, top Chinese diplomat Yang Jiechi said the first talks between Beijing and U.S. President Joe Biden's administration were, quote, candid, constructive, and helpful, but warned that differences remain, according to state news agency Xinhua reported early Saturday. Foreign Minister Wang Yi said China still hopes the U.S. will meet Beijing halfway, adding that respect for each other's core interests is vital, and the door for China-U.S. dialogue would be always open if those ideas are upheld. He also warned Washington not to underestimate China's determination to safeguard its national sovereignty, security, and development interests. Take a look.
We expected to have tough and direct talks on a wide range of issues, and that's exactly what we had. We had the opportunity to lay out our priorities and intentions, and to hear from the Chinese side their priorities and intentions. We were clear-eyed coming in, we're clear-eyed coming out, and we will go back to Washington to take stock of where we are.
同时，我们向美方明确指出，主权和领土完整问题是重大的原则问题，在这些问题上，美方不要低估中方维护国家主权、安全、发展利益的决心，不要低估中国人民捍卫民族尊严和正当权益的意志。
双方应该按照不冲突、不对抗、相互和尊重、合作共赢的精神来处理中美关系。
The 2 days of talks between the world's top 2 economies held in Alaska on Thursday and Friday began in acrimony, with both delegations launching broadsides over human rights and geopolitical ambitions. Yang sounded a positive note as the talks wrapped up, but noted there are still some important differences between the two sides.
Meanwhile, Pentagon Chief Lloyd Austin praised India's growing ties with like-minded partners as he held talks in New Delhi Saturday, dominated by shared alarm about China. India is a vital U.S. partner in the Asia-Pacific region as Washington seeks to take on Beijing, and Austin's two-day trip is New Delhi's first face-to-face meeting with President Joe Biden's administration. Take a listen.
India, in particular, is an increasingly important partner among today's rapidly shifting international dynamics. And I reaffirmed our commitment to a comprehensive and forward-looking defense partnership with India as a central pillar of our approach to the region. As the world faces a global pandemic and growing challenges to an open and stable international system, the U.S. and India relationship is a stronghold of a free and open Indo-Pacific region. We discussed opportunities to elevate the U.S.-India major defense partnership, which is a priority of the Biden-Harris administration, And we'll do that through regional security cooperation and military-to-military interactions and defense trade.
U.S.-Indian relations have historically been prickly, but China's growing assertiveness pushed them closer together under Modi and former U.S. President Donald Trump. This accelerated after 20 Indian soldiers and 4 Chinese troops died last June in a clash on their disputed border high in the Himalayas. The nuclear-armed Asian giants then sent thousands of extra troops to the frontier, although tensions have eased somewhat with a pullback from one area of contention. Beijing has irked New Delhi with its support for arch-rival Pakistan, as have Chinese investments in Indian Ocean nations that India sees as its backyard. India and China have also engaged in a tussle of vaccine diplomacy, competing to supply other countries with coronavirus shots to secure goodwill and influence.
Stable international system. The
U.S. President Joe Biden denounced the upsurge of violence against Asian Americans, telling a community plunged into grief after this week's Atlanta murders that the nation must not be complicit in the face of racism and xenophobia. 6 Asian American women and 2 others were shot and killed Tuesday at 3 massage businesses. And police have not named a motive, but the president vowed to fight Asian American hate and violence. He delivered a brief speech at Atlanta's Emory University. Take a look.
But whatever the motivation, we know this. Too many Asian Americans have been walking up and down the streets and worrying, waking up each morning the past year feeling their safety and the safety of their loved ones are at stake. They've been attacked, blamed, scapegoated, and harassed. They've been verbally assaulted, physically assaulted, killed. But for all the good that laws can do, we have to change our hearts. Hate can have no safe harbor in America. It must stop. And it's on all of us together, to make it stop.
Racism is real in America, and it has always been. Xenophobia is real in America, and always has been. Sexism, too. In the 1860s, as Chinese workers built the Transcontinental Railroad, there were laws on the books in America forbidding them from owning property.
Vigils have been held in several U.S. cities, and police in New York, Seattle, Chicago, San Francisco, and elsewhere stepped up patrols in areas with large Asian American populations. Georgia is home to nearly 500,000 people of Asian origin, or just over 4% of its population.
In other news, Honolulu police recently arrested a man who was causing commotion from a Waikiki high-rise apartment. As of this report, the man or his motive have not yet been identified. Still, this incident put nearby residents on edge, especially in light of recent tragic events in the U.S. mainland. We have Ron Hamilton witnessing that whole thing from a safe distance and filing this report. Ron Hamilton is from our ABC Hawaii Bureau. Ron.
At approximately 8 a.m. this morning, 2 Honolulu police cruisers were seen exiting the McCoy Shopping Center at a high rate of speed, stopping a short 1 block away at the Royal Aloha condominiums on Alawai Boulevard. More police arrived thereafter, along with an ambulance blocking all traffic from entering the area. Later, 2 SWAT-type vehicles arrived, and police, armed with rifles, exited to climb on the roof. The Royal Aloha condominium, which has a 2.5-star rating on internet review sites, is the frequent site for police activity, but not usually to this degree. To gain a better view into the apartment, the police utilized a long pole to break the window glass to see inside. Eventually, the suspect was removed from his apartment and was taken downstairs in handcuffs to a waiting police cruiser. Reporting from Honolulu, Hawaii, this is Ron Hamilton for Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
In other news, the Taliban is warning the United States against ignoring a May 1st deadline for leaving Afghanistan as agreed to last year. The warning came a day after international talks in Moscow. The militants insist the U.S. abide by the agreement. U.S. President Joe Biden on Wednesday cast doubt on meeting the deadline, saying he was in the process of deciding when troops would leave. The Taliban insurgents have largely stuck to a promise not to attack U.S. or other foreign troops since the agreement was struck in February last year. But they say the date to end America's longest war is inflexible. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Events happen around us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced. Eagle News, because we live in interesting times.
Innovation, digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations, all face interesting challenges in the market today. Peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business. Your weekly dose of entrepreneurial inspiration to update you on the latest developments in the world of business. Get up close and personal with CEOs and thought leaders to help you discover valuable insights, sharpen your instincts for smart decision making with the latest markets and economic trends, disruptive ideas, global innovation, social entrepreneurship, and other leading-edge business ideas. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business, from vision to action.
Welcome back to the news. A total of 46 additional B117 variant cases, 62 more B1351 variant cases, and 6 additional P3 variant cases were detected in the 11th batch of specimens submitted to the Whole Genome Sequencing, Department of Health, University of the Philippines, Philippine Genome Center, and UP National Institutes of Health. They were among the 150 samples, mostly from National Capital Region laboratories, sent for investigation and verification. The agencies emphasized in a statement released Saturday that the P3 variant is still not identified as a variant of concern. Of the additional 46 B117 variant cases, 36 are local cases from the NCR, 2 are from returning overseas Filipinos or ROFs, and the other 8 are still being verified. Only one one has recovered so far based on data released on Friday. It brought the total number of B117 cases in the country to 223. The two ROFs indicated their addresses as Cagayan Valley and Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. Of the 62 B1351 variant cases, 43 are local cases and 19 are being verified if they are local or ROF cases. A total of 60 are still active and 2 have recovered. The total number of B1351 cases in the country is now at 152. Of the 43 local cases, 41 are from NCR and 2 are from Calabarzon. As for the P3 variant, 6 additional cases that are still active, 4 are local cases, all from the NCR, and 2 are being verified if they are local cases or from ROFs. The DOH urges the public to stay at home unless extremely necessary and remember to avoid the 3 C's: closed spaces, crowded places, and close contact settings.
And the United States cleared President Biden's goal of administering 100 million doses of vaccines more than a month before the target date of his 100th day in office. Let's listen in.
But first, I want to start with the important announcement the president made yesterday. We reached our 100 million shots goal in just 58 days, weeks ahead of schedule. Achieving this goal is a direct result of deliberate, aggressive actions guided by the president's whole of government national strategy to end the pandemic.
And despite initial skepticism about the goal of getting out 1 million vaccines a day, health workers are now injecting between 2 and 3 million shots daily. The accelerating vaccine rollout is dovetailing with falling infection rates, leading to optimism that the world's biggest economy is headed for a powerful rebound.
Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan has tested positive for COVID-19, his office said Saturday, just 2 days after he was vaccinated against the disease. At this point, his office said in a statement, the Prime Minister's office can only confirm that the Honorable Prime Minister has tested positive for COVID-19 and has self-isolated. We will release more details in due course. The 68-year-old Khan received a shot of the Chinese-produced Sinopharm vaccine on Thursday as the country battles a third wave of the virus. Earlier Saturday, Khan's advisor on health said the increase in positive virus cases over the past few days was an alarming situation. The impoverished nation of 220 million has largely avoided the kind of major lockdown seen in other countries, instead opting for smart containment policies which see neighborhoods closed off for short periods. Soon after the pandemic started, Khan told the nation in an address not to panic, saying 97% of patients fully recover. But he chided residents just months later, warning people are not taking it seriously.
EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen threatened to halt exports of AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccines if the bloc did not receive its promised deliveries first, escalating a row that has fanned international tensions. The warning comes as the European Union struggles to speed up its COVID-19 inoculation campaign, just as many member states are facing a third coronavirus wave and renewed curbs on public life. Von der Leyen said Anglo-Swedish pharma giant AstraZeneca had delivered only 30% of the 90 million vaccine doses it had promised for the first quarter of the year. The company has blamed production delays at its EU plants, but European officials are furious that AstraZeneca has been able to deliver its UK contract while falling short on the continent. European Commission President von der Leyen had on Wednesday already threatened to invoke emergency powers to block European exports of COVID-19 vaccines to ensure reciprocity with other suppliers.
Meanwhile, France, Poland, and Ukraine introduced new lockdown measures Saturday to fight a surge in coronavirus infections as the European Union threatened to block exports of AstraZeneca jabs in an escalating row over vaccines. In Poland, most shops will be shut for the next 3 weeks, along with hotels and cinemas, with similar measures introduced in Ukraine's capital, Kyiv. A third of France's population also woke up to new restrictions, with non-essential shops shut in Paris for at least a month, although schools are staying open. Some 20,000 people were expected at a demonstration in the German city of Kassel on Saturday, raising fears it would turn into a super spreader event. Infection rates are once again rising exponentially in Germany, with the vice president of the Robert Koch Institute for Infectious Diseases warning of signs of a return to many severe cases and deaths, and hospitals that are very overwhelmed.
Meanwhile, Dr. Anthony Fauci explains the threat of the B.1.1.7 COVID-19 variant and how the U.S. can combat it by increasing vaccinations and maintaining public health precautions such as mask mandates and social distancing. Let's listen in.
Thank you very much, Dr. Walensky. So very first, let me take just a few seconds to refresh your memory about the variant. It was first detected in the UK in December of 2020. It was reported in over 90 countries. The first US cases were detected in the United States, in Colorado, at the end of December of 2020. And since then, it has been detected in 50 jurisdictions in the United States and likely accounts now for about 20 to 30% of the infections in this country, and that number is growing. Next slide. Of concern is that there are about 50% increase in transmission with this particular variant that has been documented in the UK. And there's likely an increase in severity of disease if infected with this variant. Next slide. This is an example of that. If you look at the daily confirmed cases in certain selected European countries over a period of time, and as you can see, the last date on this slide is March 17th. This is what I referred to previously about the surges that are going on in Europe. In a couple of UK studies, this one, looking at over 54,000 matched pairs of participants in the UK, in which one person was infected with the B.1.1.7 and another one with the previously circulating variant, there was a 64% increased risk of death for those with the B.1.1.7. Next slide. In this similar study in the UK, there was about 5,000 deaths that were analyzed where there was the presence or absence of 1.1.7, and again, an estimated 61% higher risk of death with B.1.1.7. Next. There's been a minimal impact on viral neutralization either by convalescent plasma or, importantly, by post-vaccination sera. Next slide. And so on this last slide, as you can see with Israel as an example, where the B.1.1.7 predominates, as their vaccine doses into the arms of individuals increase, you're seeing a very dramatic and steady diminution of cases, which is underscoring the effect and the capability of the currently utilized vaccines against 1.1.7. With that encouraging note, I want to end with a big caveat. The way we can counter 1.1.7, which is a growing threat in our country, is to do two things: to get as many people vaccinated as quickly and as expeditiously as possible with a vaccine that we know works against this variant, and finally, to implement the public health measures that we talk about all the time.
U.S. health authorities on Friday revised downward their recommendations on the amount of distance needed between school students, citing the latest research on limited coronavirus spread among children as the government pushes to reopen schools. The announcement by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reduces the minimum distance for students in elementary schools, generally ages 5 to 11, from 6 feet or 2 meters to 3 feet or 1 meter, whatever the current state or current rate of community transmission. Watch this.
Specifically, in elementary schools, CDC is now recommending that all students remain at least 6 feet apart in classrooms where everyone is wearing a mask, regardless of whether community COVID-19 risk is low, low, moderate, substantial, or high. In middle and high schools, CDC is also recommending that students be at least 3 feet apart in classrooms where everyone is wearing a mask and the community level of risk is low, moderate, or substantial. Because COVID-19 is spread more likely among older students, CDC recommends that middle and high school students should be at least 6 feet apart in communities where COVID-19 risk is high, unless cohorting is possible. Cohorting is when groups of students are kept together with the same peers and staff without close interaction with other groups or cohorts to reduce the risk of spread throughout the school. We recognize that cohorting is harder in high school students, but the science indicates that these students are also at higher risk of transmitting SARS-CoV-2. I want to emphasize that these recommendations are specific to students in classrooms with universal mask wearing.
6 feet of spacing is still recommended between adults in schools as well as between adults and students. The CDC recommends all these activities should take place outdoors or in large, well-ventilated spaces. The administration of President Joe Biden is pushing states to prioritize vaccines for teachers and has called on states to give educators their first shots by the end of March.
With an accelerating vaccine rollout and falling infection rates, the good news is there, and the trend is clear. The U.S. is inching towards a return to normality. The bad news for some, though, is that very same thing, the dreaded return to regular life. Here's psychologist Dr. Roseanne Kapana-Hodge. Let's listen in.
When it comes to feelings of anxiety and panic and worry about re-entering the world, there are people that have had no prior history of any mental health issues who are experiencing this. There are also people who do have a prior history of anxiety, depression, OCD, and it seems to have exacerbated their pre-existing conditions. And I definitely am seeing both kids and adults having a real worsening of symptoms when they're not doing the things that are really important in taking care of their mental health. So things like meditation and yoga and exercise, eating well, and trying different ways to connect with other people. These are things that are so protective of our nervous system, our brain, our body. When it comes to children and teenagers and college kids during this time, they have been incredibly impacted. And for some children, they are worried about going back to school and getting sick, and that's across all ages. But for most of the children, what they really want is to go back to school. And being home without structure has been hard on kids and parents across the globe. If we look at viruses and virusology, most viruses, the Spanish flu, took about 3 years. So we are in the middle of this. We are not in the end of this, even with a vaccination. And there are still bumps ahead because this is an extended period of a lack of normalcy for people in their day-to-day life. And
Eagle News will be right back. Don't go away.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Ito po si Renz Verano. Abangan niyo po ako ngayong linggo sa Himig ng Lahi, alas 8 ng gabi. Ito lang sa Net 25.
Factual.
We have to defeat the virus everywhere.
Timely information. Balanced. Not only in the country, but also abroad.
I'm certain of one thing.
Interviews that people need to know. Watch Aguila Pilipinas! A 1-hour newscast of reports coming from regional hubs in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Know the important updates in Asia in ASEAN in Focus. Track the latest stories in the provinces in Aguila Provincia. Tune into Mata ng Aguila, the evening primetime news program of Net 25. Balanced and objective, Mata ng Aguila covers national and international issues, tackles news on business, health, science and technology, entertainment, sports and human interest features, and current events. And Eagle News International delivers the latest global reports, impartial, accessible, and up-to-date. It brings to fore EBC's rich international scope and access to valuable information streams.
Well, thank you to thank our help outdoor.
Catch these programs on Net 25. You can also watch our news programs through eaglenews.ph and Eagle News Facebook page and YouTube channel.
The International Labour Organization, or ILO, in Qatar welcomes the implementation of a universal minimum wage, saying it will benefit between 300,000 to 400,000 workers in Qatar and their family abroad. A minimum wage of $275 a month came into force for all workers in Qatar, official media reported, as the Gulf state overhauls its labor laws amid international scrutiny in the run-up to the 2022 World Cup. Listen to this.
The minimum basic wage will definitely improve the lives of hundreds of thousands of workers in the country. By our estimates, about 20% of the workforce, particularly those in the construction sector and other other sectors, including security and cleaning services. That will benefit those workers, but also their family members back home. By our estimates, between 300,000 and 400,000 workers are going to benefit directly from the minimum wage. We've already seen in the months leading up to this, in the transition period since the law was announced, that companies are now already introducing the minimum wage earlier than was required as a way to attract and retain workers. Really significant, the dismantling of the most problematic aspects of the kafala system is really making a difference to the lives of workers, but is also going to improve the business environment as well as the economy as a whole. It has benefits for all parties. And this is obviously bearing fruit, and you will continue to see that. So certainly on the right path, though of course there are still challenges that remain to ensure more effective implementation of this legislation.
A minimum wage of $275 a month came into force for all workers in Qatar Saturday, official media reported, as the Gulf state overhauls its labor laws amid international scrutiny in the run-up to the 2022 World Cup. The minimum became mandatory for all newly signed contracts from August 30 and will now also be compulsory for existing employment agreements. It requires that all workers, including domestic staff, be paid at least 1,000 riyals or $275 for a month of full-time work, equivalent to around $1.30 an hour. Employers are also required to either provide bed and board or an additional 800 riyal a month allowance for food and accommodation. Previously, there was a temporary minimum wage set at 750 riyals or about $206 a month.
The Overseas Workers Welfare Administration, or OWA, advised overseas Filipino workers who are planning to go back home to postpone their trips. OWA Chief Hans Leo Kakdak, in a Twitter post, assured that the agency is looking for hotels in Metro Manila's nearby provinces to accommodate the returning OFWs. On Friday, the National Task Force Against COVID-19 issued Memorandum Circular Number 6, which allows all Filipinos abroad to enter the country amid a temporary travel ban, which will be in effect from March 22 to April 21. On Saturday, the Department of Health reported another single-day record of new COVID cases in the country at 7,999, almost 8,000. And this brings the total number of COVID-19 cases in the country to 656,056.
Malacanang on Friday directed all offices under the executive branch in areas under general community quarantine to require just 50% of their workforce to physically report for work to stop the further transmission of the COVID-19 in the country. Executive Secretary Salvador Medialdea, by authority of President Rodrigo Duterte, signed Memorandum Circular 85, directing all government agencies and instrumentalities of the executive branch located in GCQ zones to adopt a skeleton workforce up to a maximum of 50% operational capacity. All government offices, including government-owned or controlled corporations, are required to observe a minimum of 30% up to a maximum of 50% operational capacity from March 22 to April 4. There is a need to lay down the work arrangements that should be observed in government offices during these critical times to address the current surge in COVID-19 cases while ensuring the continuous delivery of public services, MC 85 read. The memorandum was issued following the recommendation of the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases to reduce the on-site capacity in government offices in GCQ zones to address the current surge in COVID-19 cases. Government agencies providing health and emergency frontline workers or services, border control, and other critical services may operate at a higher operational capacity according to MC 85.
Overseas fans will be banned from this summer's pandemic-delayed Tokyo Olympics, according to its organizers Saturday, in a bid to reduce virus risks and convince a skeptical Japanese public the Games will be safe. The unprecedented decision will make the Tokyo Games the first ever held without overseas spectators, as organizers scale back their ambitions for the pandemic event. When the decision to postpone the Games was taken last year, officials said the delay would allow them to hold the event as proof of humanity's triumph over the virus. But instead, the Games are shaping up to be a largely television event for most of the world, with little of the international party atmosphere that usually characterizes an Olympics. In a statement issued after talks between local organizers, Japanese officials, and Olympic and Paralympic chiefs, Games officials said the virus situation situation in Japan and abroad remain very challenging. Even with vaccines rollout, in much of the world, the virus continues to cause havoc, and the narrative from Olympic officials look to be changing. The torch relay kicks off next week with spectators barred from the launch ceremony and those lining their route asked to avoid cheering.
Finally, in our news, amateur skiers train and get a taste of the sport at the Chongli Ski Resort in Zhangjiakou, where China will hold the 2022 Winter Olympics. Watch this.
There you go. I never liked skiing.
I'm too scared to do that. But I would love to learn. I would love to learn. That's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Please see us again on Monday.
I have a problem balancing.
Yeah, me too.
At the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. We'll see you back next week. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.
It is now time to build confidence. Obviously, we reached a stage wherein the situation has affected all aspects of life. We are overwhelmed by the flood of information all around. This has in effect created a sense of uncertainty and put all of us in a vulnerable position. But we must not allow COVID to take away the very way of life of our citizens, nor take away the hope from us that we will overcome this together. There is no such thing as too much caution or too much preparation, and therefore we must be fully prepared. For all of us, the global COVID crisis revealed three fundamental issues that are common challenges. We ask ourselves, how will we be better prepared, provide stronger frontline support? How do we build more robust coordination in all fronts? How do we keep our guard up in the months ahead and balance life in the new normal? And on sufficiency, how do we adjust ourselves to live without the overindulgence of the pre-COVID world? And there are underlying challenges of producing a vaccine, of boosting the post-COVID economy in the long term towards a future of global sustainability. Fighting COVID is now a global social responsibility, not only as citizens of your own countries, but as citizens of the world. It takes leadership and sacrifice and discipline from all of us. It is often said that in times of crisis, the true character of a person is revealed. We will together show the world our character. Have faith in each other, and wherever you call home, let's re-emerge stronger and better. We've learned many lessons, and next time around, we hope to improve and take crisis communication to a whole new level. This is all I have for the English language summary of the daily press briefing for today. We'll see you again on Monday. Have a very pleasant afternoon. Please keep tab of the news and the announcement over the weekend. So hope for your full cooperation until then and beyond. So thank you very much. Sawasdee krap.
May sakit na lumalaganap, lunas di pa nahahanap. May paraan para wag tumalab.
kalat, kaalaman ay ipamalas. Pag-aralan o dali na, simulan ang disiplina. Mapahamak ay hindi na, lahat ito ay makakaya. May tamang paraan ng paghuhugas ng kamay. Distansya, pila-pila, takpan ng bibig. Stay sa bahay. Kung magiging kaisa tayo, kabilang sa pagsubok, sama-sama natin talunin. Stop the COVID-19. Stop the COVID-19.
Yo! Lahat tayo ay nababahala. Ang dami ng gawain na naaantala. Atensyon nyo'y kailangan ng italaga. Kailangan mo na magtiis at magtiyaga. Yes! Kalusugan ay kaligtasan. Lumalalang sakit ay kayang iwasan. Mag-ingat, sumunod, ito'y malulunasan. Darating din ang ginhawa ng kinabukasan. Ha!
May tamang paraan ng paghuhugas ng kamay. Distansya, pila-pila, takpan ng bibig. Stay sa bahay. Kung magiging kaisa tayo, kami na sa pagsubok, sama-sama nating talunin. Stop the COVID-19. Stop the COVID-19. Kung magiging kaisa tayo, kami na sa pagsubok, sama-sama nating talunin. Stop the COVID-19. Stop the COVID-19.
This is Net 25, a commercial UHF television station owned and operated by the Eagle Broadcasting Corporation, transmitting on a 50 kilowatt output with NTC permit number BSD-0184-2020-0452, authorizing this station to operate until July 12, 2023. Net 25 studios and transmitter are located at number 25 Central Avenue, New Era, Quezon City. Net 25 is headed by the following personnel, duly licensed by the Professional Regulation Commission and the National Telecommunications Commission. Professional Electronics Engineer Armando C. Bonifacio Jr., PECE 838. Professional Electronics Engineer Bernard N. Pangulayan, PECE 869. Professional Electronics Engineer Randy A. Velasco, PECE 555. Electronics Engineer Erickson D. Ventura, ECE 44844. Electronics Engineer Arturo F. Pascua Jr., ECE 43934. Electronics Engineer Adrian V. Augusto, ECE 59367. With first-class radio telephone operators, Enrico V. Erbite, 94-1RTG-7204. Gracious V. Pascual, 92-3PNCR-352. Modesto V. De Vera, 96-1PNCR-18494. Frets C. Moliena, 93-1PVI-6551. This is Net 25. Now signing off. Ladies and gentlemen, the Philippine National Anthem.
Bayang Magi